Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on the 7th of November. As always, we encourage you and your community to stay up to date on local weather conditions, and you can do that easily by calling us at the Alaska Weather Information Line. 1-800-472-0391 is that number, 24 hours a day, free to all Alaskans. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska if you are on your phone or your mobile device, and especially if you have low bandwidth options. Mobile.weather.gov is a great online tool for your phone or your tablet there that brings up a lighter weight web page and acts like an app. So get your forecast up on mobile.weather.gov and then save that to your home screen. Works just fine. It is your National Weather Service forecast from the people that live and work here in Alaska and are watching the weather with you and for you. So make sure you use that free service. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is how you find me. If you have a question, let me know. I'm happy to help in any way I possibly can. Let's take a look at the weather. A lot of things are changing across southeast. First off, we have a dense fog advisory from Gustavus and Glacier Bay all the way around the Horn to Yakutat, just about to Cordova. That's ongoing now and will continue through late tonight and into early tomorrow morning. So dense fog is likely in this region. The orange area that you see around the capital city and down toward Douglas Island and Juneau is a high wind watch. A Taku wind is expected to develop perhaps by Friday. Gusts there up to 60 miles per hour may be possible. So right now, a high wind watch. That is a first level alert that weather could be changing and perhaps dangerously so, and maybe producing some damage there if winds develop. Right now, it's an if. That's what a watch means. It means things are shaping up and looking like and pointing toward the possibility of that weather shaping up, but it's not here yet. If the wind starts to develop and we see signs of that happening either very soon or the wind actually starts, that would become either an advisory or a warning depending on how bad that wind would be. So right now, a high wind watch. Watch out for wind in Juneau as we go into tomorrow. As we look up to the north, you can see plenty of yellow and still some red out in southwest. The winter weather is still ongoing across parts of southwest. Let's focus here on the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta first. We still have the same setup pretty much what we've had for the last 2 days now, which is very shallow, cold air all the way down the west coast of Alaska and running into parts of Bristol Bay. But over top of that, substantial amounts of warm and wet air that are producing clouds, producing rain, and the rain is falling into that cold air and freezing on contact. So from areas from Eek to Bethel all the way up to Kuskokwim, we've been seeing freezing rain, and some of those accumulations have been very impressive. Not just a little bit of a trace amount, in some cases more than an inch to inch and a half. That is ongoing today. Right now, the threat is around Anvik and Grayling. It looks like the lower Yukon Valley has become the target today, and that threat will continue into tomorrow. So a winter storm warning is posted for the Anvik area and around the lower Yukon Valley because that's where the worst of it is right now. But that may shift a little bit north and out toward the west coast, out toward Nome, Goulven, Unalakleet, Stebbins as we head into tonight and tomorrow. The good news is, while that focus is changing for where the freezing rain may be, the amount and the intensity of freezing rain will start to diminish. It already is diminishing, which is even better news. So the intense period of freezing rain that we saw here around the Kuskokwim that's been lifting northward today is still moving northward, but the intensity is going to go away. Chances are, if you're in southwest over the weekend, you're going to see more freezing rain. The chances are it's going to be fairly light and hit and miss. The village next to you may not get the amount of freezing rain that you get tonight, tomorrow, or Saturday or Sunday, but the risk of freezing rain will continue, it looks like, and slowly shift westward. Right now we see a warning out here around Nome on the south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula. That's for high wind. Gusts around 50 to 60 mile an hour range are possible today as the wind is moving off of the Brooks Range and wrapping into parts of Norton Sound. This is all part of this larger weather system here across the Bering Sea. A little bit inland and along the Brooks Range here, we have winter weather advisories. A lot of that is for snow blowing over summits. If you're driving up over some high mountain passes, the winds are going to be strong and it very likely will be reducing visibility. So winter weather advisories still for a little bit of light falling snow around the Fairbanks area and generally east, but not for the middle Tanana Valley itself, but mostly for the potential of diminished visibility as you're driving there. And one more, wind advisories are posted for the areas around Bettles out toward Ambler, and especially north of Noatak. The winds there could also be very gusty, up to about 45 miles per hour from the north and east, and some of that is also feeding in to the Kotzebue Sound region. Conditions will be blustery, and turbulence will likely be an issue there if you're trying to fly around. Chances are you're not. The weather's already bad enough in the west that most people probably are not moving around too much. So an awful lot going on as far as winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings. Again, the freezing rain is really the big deal, and we have some wind to contend with up across some of our north and western communities. So be careful out there. Play it safe. Here's a look at the satellite picture and a couple things going on. First of all, our main low pressure system is still south and west of St. Paul. That's working that warm and wet air into parts of southwestern Alaska. The cold, shallow layer is trying to undercut that. Wish I had 3D satellites to poke my fingers back behind the clouds there. Up north, you can see a lot of cloud cover. Areas of some light snow being reported. A lot of that's probably just blowing around, though. And then we have another wave of low pressure working its way up from the eastern Gulf. This time it's bringing in moisture into southern parts of southeast. We're seeing rain here. One concern, though, is with this really intense high pressure system across western Canada and the Yukon and British Columbia, that it might push down some colder air into southern parts of southeast, perhaps on Saturday, along a frontal boundary that could produce some snow. So some places in central and southern parts of southeast, keep an eye on the forecast there. There may be some potential for snow in southern sections of southeast as we go into the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. It's really going to depend on where the stationary boundary stops, though, and right now it's kind of moving back and forth here. You'll see that in our charts here in just a few minutes. For tonight, though, we're watching for high pressure to lock in moisture around Glacier Bay all the way up toward Yakutat, so dense fog's an issue. But the other thing that's an issue is high pressure sitting across the Yukon, and a really stout high pressure system like this right now, it's a really big setup for wind across parts of Juneau and Douglas Island. So the Taku wind could develop as we go into tonight. Probably as we get into Friday there. So right now, high wind watch is posted. Low pressure sitting south and west of Kodiak has locked in moisture to south central today. Periods of rain there and warmer than it was yesterday for most locations. We did have freezing rain out around the Glen Highway corridor there into the Copper River Valley. It doesn't sound like that was too bad, certainly not to the extreme that we saw out in the southwest over the last couple days. Low pressure sitting out across the southern Berings at 988 millibars. All of this is working that warm and wet air across the south and western coast. And as that moisture is being pushed further north into colder air, this is turning into snow. It has snowed. The snow's tapering off now around Fairbanks there. It sounds like, I believe reports are somewhere on the order of 4 to 7 inches there, but sounds like that has been tapering off. But there is still snow falling. But the problem remains that as we go into tonight, that moisture is still sitting here across southwest. That cold air is still trying to move in underneath all of that warm and wet air, and there's still going to be freezing rain. You'll be very lucky if it's rain and a snow mix and not freezing on contact, but that setup is there, so that potential is there. I want to make sure that you understand that it's not going anywhere really for the weekend. High pressure across the northern parts of the Yukon at 1,036 millibars. That's not too bad, but look at the pressure gradient here. You can see those black lines stuck together. That means a wind is going to be ripping across parts of the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range there, so places north of Noatak. Ambler, Bettles, you're likely going to be looking at some pretty gusty conditions there. And there's also going to be this ribbon of wind right here across northern parts of Norton Sound. So again, that high wind warning is in effect. Looks like periods of occasionally moderate to heavy rain across southern parts of southeast tonight. Rain continues around Prince William Sound. Snow likely for the upper end of the Tanana Valley and the Copper River Valley as well. That trend continues but tapers off on Friday. Rain continues for southern parts of southeast along the boundary range. There's potential there for some snow wrapping into southern parts of the Yukon. We still have the potential for some freezing rain, though again the intensity should not be what it has been for parts of southwest and the south-facing slopes, south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula, maybe even into the Bering Strait. Low pressure keeps rain around St. Paul and St. George. Rain continues around the Kenai Fjords area up top. That's snow, of course, and rain for the Alaska Peninsula. And then here comes another weather system. Watch as it slowly works its way into the western Bering Sea. Chop probably around the central and western chain behind that rain mixed with snow. And for western ends of the Seward Peninsula and the Yukon, it still looks like freezing rain may linger into Saturday. High pressure, on the other hand, clearing things out. There should be plenty of sunshine during the day across the interior, but this high climbs to 1,045 millibars. This is a big high pressure system for this time of the year. It's not terribly cold. It's cold enough, but it's really strong for this time of the year. And because of that, that's why we're watching for wind as we get into Friday and Saturday around the Juneau and Douglas Island area for that Taku wind. That pressure gradient is right there and primed to really make that wind rip right into town. So again, the National Weather Service office in Juneau is going to keep close watch on that. And here's that stationary front I was talking about. Remember how I said it was kind of wiggling back and forth? If this wiggles a little bit further south and west, then we have a lot more cold air in places like Petersburg, Wrangell, maybe Ketchikan. If this wiggles north and east, well, the cold air is not going to be in place and snow is not going to be an issue. You'll just get rain. This front is going to be wiggling, and it's really tough to tell exactly what island that's going to be sitting on top of. So your neighbor to the south, west, or north may get a whole lot of rain or a whole lot of snow compared to what you see in southern parts of southeast. So keep an eye on the forecast in southern southeast. Forecasters will do their very best to make sure they know where that front is. And again, watch for Saturday and into Sunday for maybe a chance of snow there. Out across the western Gulf, 996 millibars there. That low pressure system working into the Alaska Peninsula. And again, southerly winds working their way northward too across the north coast. Here's a quick check of Friday temperatures. 30s and 40s in southeast. Around Prince William Sound, 30s and 40s for you. About 36 around Golcana, 17 in Northway, 5 below in Eagle, 12 for Fairbanks. Single-digit temps for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Utqiagvik, 16, about the same there in Kotzebue, 22 in Nome. 30s for the Yukon Delta, 20s in fact for Unalakleet. Galena only 13 degrees, 40s for parts of Bristol Bay. Out in the chain, 40s, 39 in St. Paul, 45 on Friday. Pretty cold stuff for the upper Yukon.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation weather now. IFR concerns will linger across southern parts of southeast and then stretch all the way into Prince William Sound and the Copper River Valley again. Watch for icing conditions there, whether you're driving or flying, but certainly flying, the conditions will be fairly low through most of your favorite passes and up the western side of the Alaska Range. Cook Inlet will likely see some patchy VFR, and some that could extend into the Susitna Valley for Friday morning. Might be nice to see a little sun. Out across the YK Delta, watch for IFR concerns there, all the way out through Makoriuk and Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, and then extending even further west out toward the Pribilofs, and then just kind of nosing into the central chain. And Nikolsky, Unalaska Dutch Harbor could be right there in on the fringe, as well as the south-facing coastlines of the Pacific coastline there, for example, of the Alaska Peninsula, and areas around Kodiak Island up into the Barren Islands. As we get into Friday, really not a whole lot of change for the afternoon hours here across the western Gulf or across southern parts of southeast. Marginal conditions all the way up to Sitka, Port Alexander, up through Petersburg and Wrangell. Juneau may see VFR all the way up to Yakutat and just about to Cordova before that marginal conditions start to sneak back in. You'll see marginal ceilings and viz just offshore of Point Barrow, all the way north of Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, and IFR all the way through the Bering Strait, St. Matthew, St. Paul, Makoriuk, and the western end of the Yukon Delta and the southern, northern parts, of the Kuskokwim Delta and the Killbuck Mountains there. Places like Amonuk likely looking at IFR throughout the day. Saturday morning, IFR lingers in the same old spot here, and under this region again is where we're concerned mostly with freezing rain continuing in spotty locations, and some of that may still be hit and miss across southwest. So don't lose sight of that threat as we go through the weekend. It may actually increase as we've been talking about as we head into Sunday and Monday. Now for the Pacific coastlines again in the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, we're looking at IFR concerns there and also lingering IFR across the western end of the Alaska Range. That becomes MVFR. More VFR though shaping up across the interior parts of southwest, the North Slope, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, even over Anchorage, and across the northern Gulf into central and southern parts of southeast. Just hit and miss MVFR as we go into Saturday afternoon. So a whole lot going on there just with ceiling and viz alone, and again that freezing rain threat. More on that in a minute. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass look to be improving as we go into Friday, certainly Saturday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass not so much. IFR for your Friday. Merrill Pass probably leaning back over to IFR. It's going to go up and down all day long. Windy Pass at least starts at IFR with some potential for improvement throughout the day to MBFR, and we'll see similar trends there in Isabel Pass with an IFR start. Mentasta Pass looks like IFR to go. Probably marginal conditions by the end of the afternoon. Again, a lot of freezing rain potential there is diminishing around Mentasta Pass in the Copper River Valley. So improving conditions out there. Tenita Pass, IFR, it looks like, at least for Friday morning. Portage Pass the same, and Chilkoot and White Pass improving, trending toward better weather as we go into your Friday and Saturday. Here's the freezing levels. I really think this is probably the most important image that you'll see all day if you're flying in southwestern Alaska. Here's the freezing line all the way up to Nome and across the Alaska Range. And these are the elevated freezing lines, right? So 6,000 feet, 4,000 feet, 2,000 feet. This is overrunning the surface freezing line. This area here is still in the target zone for freezing rain. Not good. Isolated severe icing potential below 1,000 feet. That's what you need to remember. Lock it in. Not good weather to fly in at all as we get into Friday morning. So that's what we've drawn in here. Don't focus on exactly that spot where the freezing rain could be. These are certainly areas that have a higher potential, but this entire region, all the way up to Nome, in fact, is under that threat for freezing rain. So below 1,000 feet, at least considerable moderate and isolated severe. If it is raining in those areas, it is going to be freezing rain, most likely. Now, everywhere else, no problem. If you're seeing rain around the Gulf Coast, this is not a problem. The freezing level is above 7,000 to 8,000 feet. The air is warm. It's that surface shallow layer of cold air that is the problem in these cases. Here's the jet stream. No rest right now. It looks like high pressure up across the Arctic coast, dragging in that warm, wet air across southwest and south central and southeast. The main jet core is well to our south, 170 knots coming out of Asia. High pressure sitting across the north slope with that cold air being shunted into western Canada in the lower 48. Broad, wet, southeasterly flow coming up 20 to 40 knots on the west coast, 25 to 35 knots at 3,000 feet. Low pressure sitting just offshore of southeaster, dragging in a southerly flow as well, so keeping things unsettled, especially for southern parts of southeast. And choppy. Considerable moderate there as we go into tomorrow below 4,000 feet. A little bit of chop around Yakutat, Gustavus, and the Lynn Canal. As you look further north, remember we've been talking about that fast-moving river of low-level air across the Brooks Range. The Kobuk and Noatak valleys there, a chance for considerable moderate to isolated severe below 4,000 feet as we go into Friday on the north side of that system.
The Transit of Mercury 2019. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. The last great astronomical event of 2019 is happening next week, and we've been waiting 3 years to see it.
It's not a planetary conjunction, and it's not a lunar or a solar eclipse, but it is something so rare that it only occurs 13 times every century.
The tiny planet Mercury will go directly between us and the sun. You'll be able to see Mercury completely silhouetted by the fusiony furnace that is our sun.
It's called a transit of Mercury, and we'll get you ready to view this rare event safely on November 11th. Let's show you.
Okay, the date is Monday, November 11th, and it's just before sunrise. If we're going to see Mercury pass in front of the sun, that means we have to look during the daytime. So we'll go through several hours of that day to see what happens.
First, let's appreciate the sunrise. The sun will rise in the southeast, move up and to the right, cut slowly and surely across the southern sky, and then set in the southwest. Did you notice anything?
I sure didn't. I thought this transit of Mercury was some awesome event. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary.
That's because a transit of Mercury is a subtle alignment that takes a skillful, savvy observer to witness, and one needs access to some extra equipment. Remember, Mercury is very small, and staring at the sun too long will blind you.
First, you'll need a safe solar filter, one that is approved by astronomers to look at the sun. Do not use sunglasses, foil, CDs, film negatives, mylar, x-rays, or any homemade filter. They will not protect you.
Solar eclipse glasses and number 14 welder's glass can protect you from the sun, but you'll need more than that to see Mercury that day. You'll need magnification.
Mercury is so small compared to the sun that you will not be able to see it with the naked eye. That means you'll need to put safe filters on your binoculars and telescopes to see it. Proper filters go in front of the lenses or mirrors and block out the light before it enters the telescope.
Once you're properly outfitted, here's what the sun will look like with a zoomed-in view. You'll first see Mercury at around 7:36 a.m. Eastern Standard Time as a little black spot growing along the edge of the sun. By 7:38, Mercury will appear completely inside the sun's disk.
To paraphrase a certain song, there'll be a little black spot on the sun that day.
Indeed, then you can watch Mercury slowly continue in its orbit around the sun and seem to pass through it, minute by minute, hour by hour. At 10:30 a.m., it'll be about halfway through.
Then at 1:02 p.m., Mercury starts heading off the sun, and 2 minutes later, Mercury is invisible once more. So a transit of Mercury can last more than 5 hours, with the most exciting parts at the beginning and the end.
If you don't have a safe solar filter and a telescope, contact your local astronomy club or planetarium. Chances are they'll be welcoming guests to view this rare event. Astronomers, whether amateur or professional, love sharing the heavens with others. So, see if your community is planning a transit of Mercury party on November 11th.
Finally, notice that the transit lasts from 7:36 a.m. to 1:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please adjust your time accordingly. That means that people on the West Coast will not see the beginning of the transit because the sun will not have risen yet.
But fear not, you'll still see hours of it before Mercury departs the sun's disk. Stargazers on the East Coast will see the entire thing.
You know what, James? I've waited 3 years to see this transit.
Me too. And if you miss this one, the next transit of Mercury won't be until November 13th, 2032, and the next one visible from the United States won't be until May 7th, 2049.
Wow. In other words, on November 11th, make sure you keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Back with your marine weather now. New ice has been forming across the Beaufort. The marginal ice area is expanding there all the way out toward Utqiagvik. You can see ice developing along the coast, a little bit thicker ice there with concentrations greater than 80%, which is great news. We are seeing some new marginal ice across the Kotzebue Sound area. Temperatures there and sea surface temperatures as well have been dropping, allowing that to change. Ice there around Kotzebue out towards Shishmaref. And we're also seeing some new ice there in the upper end of Norton Sound and some marginal ice along the YK coastline. The problem is there's a lot of warm air coming up the west. A lot of this is going to change and probably go away, especially in the YK Delta. Here's a look at the forecast for Friday. Northerly winds coming into the Lynn Canal, 30 knots and 5-foot seas. Northerlies through Stevens Passage, and southeasterly winds coming up through Clarence Strait, and an offshore flow from Yakutat all the way through Cross Sound and Gustavus, and south and easterly winds south of Port Alexander and Sitka. We're watching again for those stronger winds to develop through the Taku wind area. And it looks like that's going to really pick up as we head into Friday and maybe Saturday. So keep an eye on that. You see these winds coming up here in the forecast for Saturday. Northerlies up to 40 knots with 8-foot seas. And then around the Stevens Passage area, and certainly in those very particular spots, there could be some serious winds and gusts coming through the canyons. And again, the Taku wind is certainly a potential there. Gust of 50 knots, northerlies through Clarence Strait, and then an offshore flow develops as that wind is rushing down and out of southeast, 25 to 35 knots in some cases, with 9 to 11, even 12-foot seas heading down to the southern coast. For Friday in South Central, not so bad. Prince William Sound, 10 knots, 2-foot seas. Looking for variable winds here across the northern Gulf, and east to westerly flow across the western Gulf at 20 knots. Stronger winds south of Kenai into the western Barrens, 25 to 30 knots. Watching for wind to come out of Homer. Looking for 5 to 8-foot seas on Friday. That improves slightly as we head into Saturday. Northeasterlies 15 to 30 through Cook Inlet with the strongest winds still over the Barrens, and light winds continue inside of Prince William Sound. Easterlies across the north and western Gulf, 20 to 25 on Saturday. For Bristol Bay, easterlies at 20 knots, 4-foot seas there. 4-foot seas down the coast as well. A north and easterly wind coming down the north and western Gulf, 15 to 20 knots with 6 to 7-foot seas on Friday. That builds a little bit more on Saturday, 15 to 25, looking for 6 to 7-foot seas from Kodiak all the way out towards Sandpoint. 5-foot seas coming down the Bering Sea coast and out of Bristol Bay, 20 to 25 knots expected for Saturday. For the Aleutians, northeasterly winds still blowing into Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, north and westerly winds coming into Nikolsky. Look for that northwesterly flow across the central chain, 20 to 25, 9 to 12-foot seas there. Southerlies building in out across the west with the next weather system coming in. 25 knots and 10-foot seas there on Friday, becoming westerly at 30 with 11-foot seas on Saturday. A variable wind here across the central and eastern chain as southerlies start to build into that next storm. You can already see the front right about here, the changing wind direction. And then north and easterly winds still hanging on to the central and eastern chain, mainly around Unalaska, Nikolsky, 10 knots and 4 to 6-foot seas on either side. For the west coast, easterly winds blowing into Savunga and Gamble out of Norton Sound off of Macoriac and Nunivak Island and the YK Delta, 20 to 25, maybe even 30 knots around Norton Sound. Again, some of the strong winds tonight right there along the coastline. Light winds around St. Paul and St. George, 5-foot seas expected for Friday. That diminishes a little bit on Saturday. East and southeasterly winds feeding into the next front, 20 knots off the coast, including Norton Sound. Winds improve there to about 20 knots with a 4-foot sea on Saturday. For the North Slope, east and southeasterly winds across the Beaufort, not as bad as yesterday, 25 knots, 5-foot seas in the region. Easterlies a little bit stronger for the Chukchi. Look at these seas, 9 to 10 feet outside of Kotzebue Sound. 30 to 35 knot winds out of the east. On Saturday, south and southeasterly winds build in. Warmer air is rushing northward at this point, and an east and southeasterly wind across the central and Beaufort seacoast there. We're looking at about 20 knots with 3 to 6-foot seas as you head into Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather, a weather front is sitting right across the interior on the north side of this. It's cold enough for snow. Snow is tapering off through tonight across many parts of the central and eastern interior. There will still be snow around tomorrow, but again, it's trending in a diminishing fashion. There are gusty winds still possible around the Brooks Range and just south into places like Noatak. Also around Nome, looking for gusty winds, and advisories and warnings are posted because of that. And freezing rain is still a big potential through the rest of the weekend across Southwest. That trend continues as we go into Friday and Saturday, but it is improving, not going away entirely, but it will still be around, so be extra careful out there. It looks like wind will be setting up for parts of southeast. Fog tonight in northern southeast, and the Taku wind could be rearing its head as we head into Friday night and Saturday around Juneau and Douglas Island. So a lot going on around Alaska. Stay tuned for more. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.